job,
No cussing.
Carol.
Yeah, I put on a little, blush, little. Hope that wasn't on the recording.
I'll just sit.
Hi, Barb and Brent.
How are you guys?
You get to see some of your pretty bird art in the back.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
One nice thing about having artists for a husband, you got plenty of artwork.
Yeah.
Plenty of
Well, that's
artwork.
nice, right?
Yeah, I have, what's this guy's name? I forgot. Caleb Bingham. I forgot his name even. Anyway,
All right. Oh,
Oh, I see. Anne's got her Christmas tree up and lit.
very good.
she can
Yeah,
show
Barb.
us, you can show us that at the Christmas, at the holiday party
Right, I'll do
on
that.
Thursday.
I'll get all set up for my
Get all ready.
background.
Yeah, we got ours up finished pretty much today. We have so many ornaments. We lived in Germany for several years. We have
Oh,
so
I
many
bet.
ornaments. Unbelievable. It's like, which one should we put on the tree? Which one should we just keep in a box?
I'm
Two-
getting bad. A couple of years ago, even last year, I didn't put very many ornaments out. And Tom said, this year I don't even know who's going to be here, but
That's what Brent said. No one's going to come, but we should go ahead and put it out. And we will take pictures and send them to our students from India.
Oh, that
there you
sounds
go.
good.
Yeah.
Because normally we would we just met them in January this year. So we normally would have them over and they'd help us decorate the tree and we talk about the traditions and stuff, but that's not going to happen. So I just send them texts or emails and say, like I told them about St. Nicholas Day. I mean, I'm sure that we're not supposed to because they're doing all their stuff online,
Yeah.
waiting, doing nothing out in the community.
Becky, John wants to share his screen some. He inspired me maybe to try that. I'll see how it works on him. He can just share his screen, right?
I think he can. If it doesn't work, I can make him like a co-host, up his
Okay.
power quotient, and that will allow him to.
Yvonne, I think he can just share his. Yvonne joins us. Yay.
What a pretty picture.
And Carol, hi. Joanne.
Carol, hi,
I
Yvonne.
finally got the visual thing. I didn't know why it wasn't working.
Hi, Sylvia.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Where did you go? He's gone. Oh, there she is. So Becky, the one thing that I was, maybe concerned about, like if I try sharing my screen, then I have to minimize all the people. And it
No.
kind of helps when you can see everybody because you kind of see if somebody, might want to say something. So maybe people can help watch each other.
I think
they
when
show
someone
up
is
on
sharing
the
their
side
screen,
real small.
when someone is sharing their screen, it basically shows that's the whole screen everyone sees, and the person who's talking is like a little icon up in the corner, but all of the rest of us go away for a while.
Right. I meant on mine, like if because I'm not hosting. Right. Okay. Do you see it then? Will the host see everybody's picture?
No, not while someone is screen sharing, no.
Well, when we get a library board thing, she puts them on through her computer and all the participants are in little squares on the side. That's all I know.
Yeah, that might work. Sometimes it depends what kind of computer you have, how that shows up.
I don't know it.
It also matters how expensive the Zoom is you have. I'm kind of the mid-tier level.
Okay.
Okay, I didn't know there was a big difference.
Well,
Yeah,
the
the
thing
more you
is
pay,
that
the
then
more fancy
people will,
buttons you get.
right, if people have a question when John's talking, they'll just have to speak up because we won't be able to see you waving your hand or something.
Well, somebody could
Or
put
put
a
it in the
question
chat.
in the chat and I can see that and let him know.
Mhm. Okay. Hi, John
Everybody.
Hi,
Hi.
John.
and Jane.
Okay, I'm making John a co-host just to
Brett.
make sure he's got screen sharing ability. I'm not quite sure if he controls that, but that ought to do it.
I could see share screen
Mhm.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
you got it.
on
then.
my thing,
Okay,
right?
and we are recording this, just so everyone's aware of it. No, don't have somebody dance in the background or,
So you don't want us doing a dance or something.
Right. Right. Yes. Use your best etiquette. I get it. I get it. So I was just going to talk, I was going to share my screen, kind of have some of the things that I put in the Google Drive, which I know are late, but a lot of the information is familiar to some of you, and it's probably a repetition of some things that you've heard about. So I thought I would just talk for a little bit, just to put out a context, and then we just have a discussion. Does that sound right?
That's right. Sounds great. Let's
Okay,
wait just a few more. Let's wait a couple of minutes. I don't know.
that's fine.
We had some people come in a little bit late last time. Let's see. Oh, John, why don't you go ahead and, because they can always pick up the recording if they miss something.
It's up to you. I don't mind waiting, or if you want to go, we can go. Should we go?
It's 4 after, so
Okay.
Let's go ahead and go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So like I believe all of you have, or most of you at least, have had the pleasure or the fortune of being around since, I'd say since since 1950, but since the Great Society, the Johnson administration, the beginning of the war in Vietnam, and then I was in graduate school in social sciences in the 70s. And so I remember this was in the mid 70s, how there was I think they were called neocons then, although it's a different connotation later, but how there was this journal called The Public Interest, and it seemed like its main purpose was to show that government really couldn't do anything right. And they started going after the Great Society and showing how their programs were not successful. Turns out, in retrospect, that is not true, that they were quite successful in certain ways, particularly in building communities where there weren't any before, of the kind of a face-to-face group of people who together mobilized to accomplish things. So out of that came the federally qualified health center movement, local health centers, lots of community action agencies, a lot of things came from that, even though the funding eventually dried up. So the reason I mention that is because the Great Society was an effort to address the conditions like poverty that are associated with violence and crime. And I know you all have heard of the Kerner Report, which was after the after, I believe was in response to the riots that happened after Martin Luther King died. So the huge riots in Chicago and Newark and in multiple cities. And again, that report was very clear about establishing that there's the stark reality of inequality in America. There was, and at the neighborhood level, and that it dramatically affected people's ability to work and to have intact families, and that had a lot to do to explain the frustration and the ensuing violence of those riots. Well, geez, does that sound familiar? I mean, you fast forward to the present and you think people are discovering that there are these inequities and that that people are treated differently in the system. And so I kind of, the first thing I want to say about the question, and it seems to me like most of these questions, and you probably talked about this last time, are designed to say, duh, yes. The only possible answer is duh, yes. So should we invest in resources to sort of prevent crime? And the answer is yes, but the bigger answer is, should we be concerned about healthy human development and community life? Because those are directly related, obviously, to crime and problems at the neighborhood level. So now I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and it's going to seem like I'm rambling, but I do have it over, I believe, an overarching point. So here I go. All right, I'm going to start with this, which can you all see that?
And
It'll
our
take,
pictures
it'll
are
take it
on
a
the
minute.
right.
There you
Yes.
go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So most of us, or many of us, have probably seen this. This a not-for-profit in Minneapolis that developed this. I believe the National YMCA has used this as a model for explaining sort of the underlying philosophy behind their programs. So this was an effort to, and this is 40 developmental assets for adolescents. I think they've got 4 of these, one for, newborns to a certain age, one for elementary, one for middle school, one for adolescent. And so when you look at this, you see all the different aspects that all the different qualities of life, all the different factors that add to people feeling cared for, resourced, understood, seen, valued. And in the context of neighborhood, family, school, adults, and that some of these things are, they talk about having, like, say, other adult relationships. Young person receives support from 3 or more non-parent adults. Well, what kind of a world does somebody have to live in for that to happen? Well, the parents have to be available and have to have relationships. They have to be somewhere in proximity to relatives who can care, and there's a lot of people and young people that don't have this. Well, so the question is, they don't have it because why? Because they chose not to have it? Or is it an accident sort of who they were born to and where they were born? And later we'll talk about a little bit about the sort of the cross-cultural comparisons of these kinds of things, and where the United States in particular lacks when it comes to ensuring that, for example, there's sufficient subsidized childcare so that if a single parent is working, that they somehow can manage and feel comfortable about the arrangements that where their children are taken care of, and that's done in a way that doesn't bankrupt them. It isn't, you know, they're not doesn't take a great deal of the money that they earn. So there's also universal prenatal care as an entitlement. There are things like paid sick leave, for which the United States does not have, for working people. So those kinds of things, which I'm using this model of development assets to talk about, are the foundation of any kind of development. You know, people obviously don't develop outside of families, neighborhoods, communities, schools. They don't develop outside of relationships, good, bad, or indifferent. And so I'm just scrolling down. These internal assets are a little trickier because you sort of couldn't exactly tell by observing whether some of them were happening. The other ones seem to be a little more, you could so these assets are fundamental to healthy development. Okay, so then I am going to, now I have to figure out, how do I unshare my screen? I have to go to the bottom. No, I don't see how to not share it now. Do you know?
Go at the top of your screen. On mine, it's at the top of your screen. I think you click. Does it say stop sharing?
Mm,
Click at
oh,
the
way up. Yeah. Sorry, I got lost in my document. Okay.
above your document.
All right. Okay. So, so now I want to talk about, so let's say that people have less than ideal assets. Can you still do things? And so there was I reviewed for this purpose for today, a chapter in a book. You all can see that? Yeah. What works in crime prevention and rehabilitation. You know, we went through a period in the 70s, the same time I said that public interest was started. In fact, I think it might have been in that same journal. There was an article, what works? And the conclusion was nothing works, really. There's no way to reduce crime and recidivism. And in retrospect, that was a very skewed perspective and did not consider a wider context. You know, you can, the more narrowly you define recidivism, the easier it is to say that nothing works. And of course, the fewer resources you provide somebody who has been in any kind of a correctional situation, when they leave it, the more likely they're going to return to it because of the existing stigma, the difficulty getting a job, family disruptions from being incarcerated. There's all sorts of things that really set people up so that the system, and this is going to maybe a shock to some of you, gets exactly the outcomes that it is designed to get, which is more people returning. And you could say that there is an industry that, you know, that thrives on having people incarcerated. You know, there's an industry of feeding them. There's an industry of housing them privately. There's an industry of all sorts of things, of security equipment and surveillance monitoring and all sorts of things. So, and that's a huge growth industry and has been for some time, even when crime has gone down. You know, we doubled the people that we incarcerate, the number of people we incarcerate, or percentage of people we incarcerate, in about 12 years, I think, in the 80s and early 90s. And then crime started to go down. Violent crime more than property crime. And of course, we did not reduce our prison population. It turns out that the single biggest predictor when I was working in I worked in the juvenile detention and and probation, and mostly what I did was arrange services for offenders. And when I worked in juvenile detention, I know it was the case that nationwide, the single biggest predictor of how many kids, how full your detention center was, and how many kids you held was the size of the center. Had nothing to do with the crime rate. If you build it, they will come. If you have the beds, they will be filled. And there's a whole lot of complicated things explaining that. But one of the things that people tend to want to do when they don't know what else to do is put the problem on a shelf, put it away, put it out of sight. My garage is full of junk, you know. So incapacitating someone by putting them away is one kind of crime deterrence, but there's evidence that really did not materially affect the violent crime rate, that other things caused the violent crime rate to go down. So we'll talk about that. Anyway, this quote, this was a chapter that reviewed hundreds of studies. I mean, in table form, it said that, you know, the author and what were the conditions and how many trials were there and what were the results, and then excluded hundreds of studies. And the general findings were, and this was in particular for children, because that's where you're going to prevent something that, you know, develops later, obviously, is that developmental prevention is effective, whether it's targeted on individuals, families, or schools. They said that there's lots of pretty well-controlled studies that show that you can, in fact, prevent or reduce aggression or delinquency or violence. The findings are variable, but overall encouraging. So one of the things they say, you know, it just seems like an increased investment in developmental prevention would make an important contribution to reducing crime and violence. So that's a sort of a narrow answer to that question. Should we invest in people and communities? Is like, yeah, we could find kids that are experiencing a lot of risks and a lot of challenges, and we can do things to give them skills and sort of and you know, model behavior, you know, manage emotions, all sorts of things we can do that will make them less likely to commit crimes. So, and then the conclusion is that the benefits of this kind of prevention greatly outweigh the costs. So you don't hear that very often. What you hear is how can we afford that? And of course, that's a question of, you know, values and priorities. So I'm going to then go to let's see this. Let's see. Well, I'm going to try this. So this gets at a little bit of this is a sociologist who wrote a book called Confronting Crime in the mid-'80s, and it was a great book. I did read it and changed how I looked at things quite a bit. And I think he's nearing retirement. But basically, he put the American crime situation in context, in international context. And he said that, you know, we're a far more violent place than the rest of the advanced industrial world, period. No question about it. When it comes to really serious violence, homicide, gun assaults, forcible rape, armed robbery, we're an outlier. We're way out of line compared to other advanced industrial countries. So one of the things that I think we all know is that we have worse health outcomes and a more expensive health system than any other industrial country. We have the highest infant mortality rate. We have, well, we're outliers in all sorts of ways, including child poverty. And so the point of this, of LA Curry, is that we not only have a high violent crime rate, but it persists despite the fact that we have such a high level of incarceration. So then he talked about being in Brazil and looking at going to the favelas, which are those, well, there's that beautiful movie Black Orpheus that takes place partly in the favelas of Rio, but it's, you know, it's the slums that are just clinging to those mountains on the edge of Rio de Janeiro. And there's very little social protection. I don't know that it's changed at all, but it's the gap between the affluent people and the poor people is extremely obvious. It's I know in Sao Paulo, I know someone that used to work there. He said that he had to have a personal driver that would take him from some hotel in sort of a circle of suburbs or nicer neighborhoods around the city core, to drive through the city core to go to a university where he was working. It's just how the people did it. It was just like such a bifurcated society. So Curry's larger point is that we're a lot like that. You just don't see it. It's not as obvious here, but we're way more like a place like Brazil than we are a place like Germany or South Korea when it comes to social protections for the poor, when it comes to this disparities in income. And so what he says, and I underline, is a society that tolerates vast inequalities, that forces extreme social inclusion, then uses its criminal justice system, notably an unleashed police, to keep the whole thing contained, and then justifies all that in the name of some notion of economic necessity. Well, that's Brazil, all right, but it's also us. So, and again, this was written in 1999. What he suggests is that seeing us invest seriously in family support programs of the kind that can prevent child abuse and neglect and stop a lot of our worst violent crime before it starts. And if the kids that are in the child welfare system in some ways become often the kids in the criminal justice system, again, because we have social order that doesn't really know what to do and how to invest in such a way that those kids get all those developmental assets that we saw in that first thing. You're sort of, it's the kind of, it becomes you or your family are kind of on your own society. So then he also goes on to say that I want to see a serious and sustained challenge to our scandalous levels of child poverty, far the worst than they've been. And I think they're worse now. They got better, and I think they're getting worse. So interesting thing, he said he also read a study that estimates if women were paid the same as men doing comparable work in the paid labor force, the poverty rate among single mothers would be cut almost exactly in half. Well, okay, so I'm going to switch to I gotta figure out where to find my applications. Here we go. This is a graphic from the World Health Organization, and this is basically a framework for understanding what's called the social determinants of health. And I believe it was in Britain, maybe 30, 40 years ago, there were studies where they looked at people in the social order, and they looked at people who, let's say, were at the lower end of the working class and experienced certain kinds of stresses and issues related to, let's say, making a living or neighborhood conditions. And what they found is that a person's social position in the hierarchy was more predictive of health problems, including things like heart disease, lung cancer. They even controlled for so-called, for the, health risk behaviors like smoking and cholesterol. They controlled for that and still found that people were much more likely to have certain conditions if they were in a lower part of the social order relative to other people. And I'm not even talking about people at the bottom. So then, and I don't have a slide for this, but in the United States, there's a guy, I think he's still going, Vince Felitti, Dr. Vince Felitti, who's at Kaiser Permanente in San Diego. And he did a study called this Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And it was a largely middle-class insured population. They asked questionnaires about, and I don't have this at the top of my head, but you get the point. The adverse experiences include like interpersonal violence in the home, absent parent, parental incarceration, parental substance abuse, death of a parent. So what they found is that the number of those that you had when you were young is predictive of health problems, not all sorts of problems, but even physical health problems. Again, controlling for other behaviors that cause, poor health, you're more likely to have something like heart disease if you grow up in an abusive household, even if you eat right and exercise. So, and that is direct, that study's been replicated in various populations. CDC, you can see it on the CDC website. And that's evidence that the whole context of development has long-lasting implications for how someone does. And so that it's predictive of substance abuse, which is related to lots of criminal behavior. It's predictive of interpersonal violence, which is related to, obviously, anyway, you get the picture. I'll put something about the adverse childhood experiences study in the Google Drive, or I'll send it to Becky and ask you to do it. So, all right, so now I'm going to, let's see okay, so I've done that. Let me just see what else I have. I'm almost finished going on and on. So maybe, you're seeing everything, okay. Okay, so why go on and on about this? Well, because the levels of crime that we have, if you're going to talk about investing in communities to reduce crime, the levels of crime that we have are exacerbated by the social conditions that we have. Social conditions that we have are not under the control of the criminal justice system. They are not, they are not under the control of individuals and families. So as a society, we invest an enormous amount of money in weapon systems that we hope will never be used. We transfer a lot of money to the private sector to make those systems. We transfer a lot of money to the private sector to service our many, many military installations across the globe. So what we don't do, obviously, is invest in universal health care, universal preschool, universal child care, parental benefits post-birth, adequate social work and psychology, services for schools. Certainly, we don't do it based on the needs in those schools. So I feel like that the answer to the question is overwhelmingly yes. And but the sort of the proviso is, however, it's not how we do things here. We don't invest in people like that. So that's my speech for what it's worth.
Hey, John, specifically, which question, what's the question
Number
that
one,
this
sorry,
addresses?
number one.
Which is what?
Should we invest in, I believe, in communities and people to reduce crime?
Ah,
Isn't that?
Yeah, duh.
Yeah, well, I know. So I thought, well, I'll talk to somebody who thinks crime is just bad apples. I'll try to say a few things to indicate that there's more you should be thinking about. But
One of
So-
the things I haven't heard you mention is gun control.
well, that's not, I mean, that's not investing in communities. That's prohibiting certain kinds of behavior. I'm 100% for gun control, and I think you'll find that societies that don't have the same rates of interpersonal violence and death, if
They
they don't.
almost all have gun control, correct?
Yeah, I know. Let me look right quick at that question again, make sure I've got it. Hold
Do
on.
any of them address gun control?
I don't know.
I know the league has a separate group working on that.
I think they do. I think one does, but I'm trying to figure out where I've got this question.
Yeah, I don't think this has anything to do with gun control.
No,
think
I
this
was
just means-
asking
this-
that was contributing factors.
So investing in communities to reduce crime and violence, that's my thing. That's the question. So I feel like we're so far from, I mean, as a society, we turn out so many more people who are victimized by interpersonal violence and perpetrators. We turn out more people like that than other advanced industrial countries do. So that is the question. What are we doing that they're not doing, or what are they doing that we're not doing? And I think I've mentioned most of the things: universal health care, more equity between genders in employment, and on and on.
So let me ask a kind of a dumb question, because I feel like I'm still kind of a newbie on this. Maybe some of you guys who've been in the league longer can address this for me. If we have a question like this, where the answer seems to be like, duh, yeah, what does the league do with that information? If we all come together as different leagues and say, yes, we need to invest in community, what happens? Does that become like the basis for other policies or actions, or where does this go?
It would be the basis for action, like
So then we could do some
approving of certain bills, etc.
Okay, so it's just kind of our base policies.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I think it would be if we decided here in Edwardsville, say that we wanted to take on some project. It might be a very specific thing, but then we could go back to this and see the overall policy and think, yes, we are justified. We have the backing of the state to do this.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
it aligns with the state policy then. Okay, great, thank you.
John, I
Yeah.
don't have that question in front of me. But what were the cons? I mean,
The only con they said, one of the examples that the background sheet used, and it was a lot of it was Chicago focused because of the gangs and the obvious the high gun violence in Chicago. And it said one of the pros was, well, Starbucks invested $1 million in this community, and corporations can invest in the future of people and create jobs. And the con was, well, private interests probably won't invest in that. That was a con. That it's like, well, okay. I don't see that as a con. I see that says something about them. It doesn't say anything about the value of the investment. it presumes that businesses always know what a good investment is. Well, we know that's not true. So that was the only con it said it had.
I didn't think the cons were very developed.
Right. No, they're not.
They were pretty weak, you know.
Well, I think the questions are a bit leading.
They are leading. They are.
Yeah.
leading.
So I think that I think there's a consensus somewhere that we're agreeing with rather than developing independently, it appears to me.
And I'm mostly interested as we go through these questions in just making sure that because Chicago is such a big presence, that, you know, is there anything that we as a more rural Southern Illinois area, is there any other kind of feedback we need to include with this so that it's a very balanced question for the whole
Well,
state?
You know, there are programs that that provide services to reduce the likelihood that either juveniles or adults will get incarcerated. And so in the case of juveniles, it may be sort of like some pro-social bonding, or, you know, with a kind of an advocate, maybe sort of social works type things, those wilderness experiences. There are various things. With adults, it's often substance abuse treatment of a certain kind, you know, some way to help them, you know, some program that basically bridges what employers might think of offenders with actual people who are probably are good enough workers. They just have a stigma associated with them because they've been involved. So Illinois, that's called Redeploy Illinois, and it's
So I
it's in
wonder
multiple.
if in our response to a question like this, we need to include something like, yes, we think this is a good idea and it should be appropriate to the geographic and
Right. Well,
economic and
I was
whatever
gonna,
area.
what I was
Yeah.
thinking, Redeploy Illinois is a vehicle right now for reducing the likelihood that people are going to go further in the system. And it's pretty well studied, I think. So, I mean, St. Clair County, I
So we
know,
could include that as an
we
example.
could say, yeah, we could say Illinois
Yeah.
should continue to invest in redeploy. And, you know, I've got stuff on it and I could find more. Yeah, we could put that in there as, here's an example of a good investment.
Good.
Well, I think also just investing, and this is more important for communities that are not as well off as Edwardsville, maybe in Glen Carbon, but is just opportunities for recreation for youth. You
Right.
know, getting them off of the streets, you know, investing in maybe tutoring centers. You know, I think there's a lot of ways that we could, you know, invest money that, you know, it's going to pay back. And corporations and businesses should, you know, they should understand that if they are only going to be successful in a secure community, you know, in
Right.
sustainable, good communities.
Right.
So any investment that's put in creating the safety of that community, which means investing, you know, in the kids and stuff, is going to increase their bottom line too. Even if, you
Right.
know,
I agree. You have to have a corporation that wants to have a presence in a community and wants to claim the community as important to it. And, you know, right. I agree with what you're saying. I just think if you try to go to some like national chains, you'll find that, well, we have a program, but you have to go, you know, they make it difficult to actually, I mean, local banks usually have someone that does investment in the community, right?
Local banks are rewarded for investing in the community and they're punished
Right.
for not investing in the
Right.
community. They're rated
So
based on that.
Right, you have to get in their queue, and they would not give to a school or they don't give to organizations that
Right.
they think should already be doing something.
Right.
So part of the issue is who's accountable for this? Who owns this problem, you know? And if you could get a corporation or a business to say, yeah, we want to invest in youth, and so we'll sponsor, you know, 20 memberships to the Y. Because the Y already knows how to provide recreation for youth. And they do, our Y does give out a lot of, they don't publicize it, but they do give out stuff for kids or, people with limited means. They do give out memberships and they do give out services.
And this
So
question
that,
does not say that, doesn't really lay it on business. I think the con, by mentioning Starbucks, does kind of lay it on business, but there are all kinds of ways to invest in a community. It doesn't have to come from business. It doesn't have
Right.
to involve money. It could be volunteer time. There's a
Right.
whole bunch of stuff that isn't
Right.
addressed. I don't think that that's really for us to address unless we have some specific suggestions we think would be helpful that they haven't thought of.
yeah, well, the league, when I've looked at the league national policy on housing, and it's quite prescriptive and it's quite specific, and this should be funded by the federals and state and local should have it. So I think that the leagues, if you look at the league's policies as a whole, many of them will cover aspects of this kind of investment in communities. So that's one thing, we could do. I mean, I would be willing to do that, is just to review some of those policies and say, look, folks, we've already got, add up housing, education, childcare, equitable wages, and then you've got the investment that we're talking about. The league's already for this investment. Does that make sense?
May I say something?
Yes.
Please.
Okay. I think somewhere in here, whether it's this place or not, we ought to make an emphasis on relying on the data from various studies. In other words, the league support policies based on research, social research. If some way or other that, just like this, we've heard different research studies stated here, then if something works in place, then why not try it another place or expand on it? Anyway, just like making our decisions about the virus based on science, I think some of these decisions, we ought to make sure that they are based on research and what actually works in the community. And what would help as far as approaching businesses is to know which of these things actually, they really pay for themselves. Not only in the long term, but even sometimes in the short term, they may pay for themselves. If we know that, then that can be an effective way to get businesses and other people involved, if they know there's some basis there in research. So I don't know just how to put that in, but.
Well,
I have a question. I would like to know, is the reentry program that the state of Illinois has adopted, is that included as part of what we're doing? Or could that be included? Because that is a reentry program. Are you familiar with the reentry program?
I don't know what it most recently, no.
Okay, those are all of some of the people that they're letting out of prison because they were previously convicted for
Right.
having marijuana or,
Right.
possession of some illegal drug at that particular time way back when
Right.
marijuana was not legal. So now these people are returning back to the community. And the state is pretty much financing these people to come back to the community to get reestablished and to, be
Integrated, yeah.
yeah, into their families or whatever, or to the community. Because this is a program that has been studied and is ongoing, and it is in effect.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
being
we could,
funded by the government, by the state of Illinois.
And
Well, I
that's
think-
certainly a way to reduce crime. You want to give somebody enough support so that they can then have a
Right.
viable life without returning to crime.
Right, it
if
reduces
it's a minor
recidivism,
one.
yes.
Doesn't one of the further question further down deal with ways to, as you said, integrate people back into the community?
I think it
Yeah.
might.
And we'll talk
think
about
it
that, maybe
does.
some under restorative justice. But yeah, that it is really important, right? Reduce, so it's like, so the two prongs is like John says, how do you invest, especially starting out with children in their development so that they don't get into it? But then also into the system and crime and violence, but also once they have been there, right? And they come back to the community, how do we support them so they don't continue that? And that's, that's another aspect. And Alton has one of the highest, I think Alton has one of the highest, maybe the second highest return rate of people living there who have come out. Now, this might have been before they started letting some people go for offenses, but people come here because Salvation Army has housing for men, homeless men here. And so then a lot of them, come here to Alton because a lot of places don't have that kind of housing where people can go to. So, that's somewhere in our own county. How do we, see that? And really, every city should share responsibility for that. No.
Well, that's sort of like children that are aging out of, DCIS. There is nothing or no place for them to really go. I don't know of any housing situation that they have set up for these young people that age out of the program.
That age out of, yeah.
Uh, uh,
Go ahead.
That age out of foster care, is that what you're
Out of
saying?
Yeah, foster care.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, actually, I've come to learn that a lot of the assisted living, not Section 8, but we get assisted rent subsidy.
Yes.
Do not let felons, people that have felonies come there. If it's in a recent felony, they can't get that kind of housing. And so,
No,
And so-
I think part of what you see going up now is private facilities of people who are setting up, and they have to meet all of the state requirements in order to be able to let the people return, have a place to live, stay. And while they're there, go through counseling and other things that they have available for them to help them to be able to reintegrate.
I think on a city level and on a county level, that those will be things that we could advocate for.
Mhm.
If the funding comes, especially if a question comes up under funding, we should watch on the county level and the city level what comes up, where maybe people, because a lot of those things are only going to pass if the people speak up and want the support,
Exactly.
because there'll be a lot of negative against, some of those investments. I don't know, John, I think that I really appreciated that, especially that first chart on development, of child development. I hadn't seen that assessment of what's important.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, if you want, I'll write up something that references Redeploy Illinois and some other investments. Try to invest in the earlier end of development and say that, I guess we support that, or I don't know how much writing we need to do, but I'll do that for that question.
Okay. We were going to cover, I had question 4 down. I don't have that question exactly. It's about data collection and something. It's not real. It's kind of self-explanatory. So
Right.
that Carol was going to do that. So I thought maybe we would skip that and leave that. If there's time at the end, when we get everything covered, we can come back to some of the questions that are easier to understand,
Yeah.
So now Susan was going to try to get on here after her other Zoom, after her meeting, and and still do the pre-trial, but Anne, I told you we would do restorative justice. I'm looking for Anne. Is she on here still? Oh, right up in the top. So do you, on their list, they have that after policing, but do you want to do restorative justice tonight? I know you probably worked on it.
Let's do that.
Do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, question 8 is restorative justice, and there are 3 questions, but I'm going to start with kind of some examples and definitions before we get to the questions, because some of these examples are a part of the pro information that's in it. And I think it will make more sense if we just cover that first, and then we can just do a quick review of the questions when we come to that. So some of you may have more background and information about restorative justice than I had, but I was introduced to 2 terms and concepts important to this conversation. The first was restorative justice, the title of our question, and the second was prosecutorial diversion. And I'll start with the second one, because it's kind of the larger umbrella term under which restorative justice falls. It describes programs that can help reduce the burden on the court system by deferring prosecution or sentencing through early intervention that can result in reducing caseloads and jail days and preventing criminal records. In these interventions, criminal justice system practitioners work in partnership with stakeholders to deflect and redirect eligible individuals out of the system and into community-based services. Prosecutorial diversions prevent costs and harmful consequences to the justice system, the community, and the individual. Which brings us then to restorative justice, which is a community-based approach to dealing with crime, the effects of crime, and the prevention of crime. Most people who move through the current system of criminal justice do not find it a healing or satisfying experience. That's, of course, sort of an understatement, I think. Victims often feel re-victimized and their need for justice unmet. People who offend and their families leave more broken and damaged. A restorative justice process operates from the belief that the path to justice lies in problem solving and healing rather than punitive isolation. The questions have a link to a short video that is really good. It's about 4 minutes long, but you don't really have to go back to the document to find the link. If you want to take advantage of that at some time later, you can just go to YouTube and search for restorative justice. Why do we need it? Or you can say, why do we need restorative justice? And that will take you to that link too. But there's one line from the video narration that stuck with me, and it says, restorative justice isn't about saying sorry, it's about doing sorry. So restorative justice views crime as more than breaking the law. It also causes harm to people, relationships, and the community. So justice should focus on repairing the harm. And some examples of programs associated with restorative justice are victim offender mediation programs using trained mediators to bring victims and offenders together. And circles are similar to victim offender mediation, but they differ in that there are more people involved, people from the community, for example, or government representatives. So the study question and its resources offered some examples. Whoops, I've hit a. sorry. And there are three examples that I'm going to summarize the first two pretty quickly and then go into a little more detail about the third one, because it is really the focus of some of the pro information in the questions. So the first was from one of the documents that it was linked to, and it was called A Restorative Justice Story. And it's an example that they refer to Springfield. So I wasn't sure if it was a real case study or if it was something created to give an example of what it could be. But in this example, it says that there are two 15-year-old boys who break and enter and destroy and steal and destroy property, and that when these two come to court, they are both going to be on probation, but there is a new program. And so one of them is assigned to the traditional program and the other is assigned to the new program, which is a restorative justice model. So it talks about the fact that the first boy assigned to the traditional model, his almost total contact is with his probation officer. And while he has some of the same kinds of experiences that the second boy has, he is in no way involved with the victims of the crime. And while he begins by doing the things he's supposed to do, some community service, some group work that he's supposed to do, he has his meetings with his probation officer, but he doesn't continue to follow through because the motivation is somehow just not there for him. And he has to spend 3 weekends in jail, sort of jail. And while there, he meets other boys in the same situation that he's in. And then he hangs out with those boys later on. And so the final ending of the year is that his year of probation is that he has paid about half of his restitution. He's completed about half of his community service. And he's really in kind of maintaining a downward spiral. In fact, he's in worse shape in some ways than he was before the crime was committed. And the second boy is also given probation, but his probation officer uses this new approach that is a restorative justice approach. And it begins by bringing together in a group the family that was affected because they're the victims of the crime, the boy's family, and some members that represent the community, 3 young people and 3 adults that are representatives of the community. And at this meeting, they talk about the impact on the victims. They present their information. They really want to hear from the boy that committed the crime. Why did he do it? What led to it? So he has an opportunity to share that information too. And then the members of the community talk about how crimes like this impact the community. So at the end of the meeting, the probation officer asks everyone to give their ideas about what can be done to repair the harm and to make amends. And they ask first the boy who committed the crime to express what he thinks he should do. And he says things like he should pay restitution, and the boy's father also says that that he can take the boy and they can repair some of the damage that was done. They go on and continue the conversation, and one of the community youth suggests that Bob should help, the boy should help with the teen center's home repair project. And one of the community members offers to give him a job in his store so that he can make the money for the restitution. And so ultimately, as all this goes on, relationships are established, and there is motivation for the boy to participate in the group work and to participate in the community service activities. And while doing that, he meets other students that become his friends. And so when his year on probation ends, the probation officer holds a closing conference with all the people, and the end result is positive, and there's a good deal of satisfaction on everyone's part. So in both situations, those involved were attempting to achieve justice. But in the first boy's case, all the activities were really focused on him as an offender. Whereas in the second boy's case, the justice practices included everyone affected by the crime, relationships were established, and support was given by the group and the family. So that's an example of restorative justice for young offenders. The second example is actually from Madison County, and it's the Adult Redeploy Illinois program operated out of the Madison County Probation Department. It started in 2011, but in 2014, they added to a community restorative board to help participants engage in processes to make reparations within the community. And that CRB board offers participants who have committed nonviolent crimes positive, creative opportunities to examine the impact of their crimes and make amends with the community. The board is staffed by a part-time CRB coordinator, relies on several volunteers. Participants are matched with meaningful projects that help them connect and create networks of support within the community. And this is an adult program, as the first one was for young adults. The CRB is grounded in the values and practice of restorative justice, and participants work to repair the harm they caused while building new relationships with the community. My concern about it, although there was much more information, but the community service is only 8 hours of community service, if I understood it correctly. And it's hard for me to imagine that you accomplish as much as you would need to accomplish in the restorative justice project with such a short community service project. But maybe there were multiple community service projects of 8 hours. I'm really not sure about that. One of the community restorative board members and founders of the board said, participants are not just checking a box and getting through it. It's more about respecting their community, being part of that community again, and being respected again. So it sounds like a successful program, and I assume that it's an ongoing program, although the report, the document was actually is about 3 years old. And then the third example is the one that's mentioned so much in the study question, and it's kind of the gold standard. It is the Restorative Justice Community Court, and it was launched in Cook County in the North Lawndale neighborhood in 2017. Part of what makes the court so unique is that it is held outside of a traditional court setting and participants sit at a table on the same level as the judge. There is a judge involved in it, but there are also community representatives, and it is apart from the legal system in that if it concludes successfully, then there's no record on the part of the participant. The victim of the crime must agree to participate in the process to be eligible for the court. And in addition, the person charged must be between the ages of 18 and 26, must have been charged with a nonviolent felony or misdemeanor, must live in the community of North Lawndale, have a nonviolent criminal history, and accept responsibility for the harm caused. The court is run entirely on a restorative justice model using such tools as a peacemaking circle where the group discusses the crime committed, possible solutions, and repairs from the harm, and then creates a repair from harm agreement which details the next steps the offender must take. The Judge Sheehan, says that she hopes it will be healing to young people who today face sometimes exorbitant punishment for their crimes, and to victims who in the traditional criminal justice system get short shrift. The victims I have known, she says, are very generous, and they really want something good to come out of a negative thing. And for the offender, the restorative justice process can keep a person accountable and allow them to pay their debt, so to speak, so they do not have to pay it over and over again by being saddled with a felony conviction for the rest of their life. That's from an article that was written before it really starts, as it was just kicking off. But in a radio program report a year later, 2018, there's a good overview of the program in practice, and here's how it works. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office diverts qualifying nonviolent misdemeanor and felony cases, 18 to 26, as I said earlier, from traditional court to the community court. In exchange for an admission of guilt and a willingness to discuss what motivated the crime, participants are allowed to join the program. The participant, victim, community members, and court staff come together for a confidential conversation in a peace circle to talk about the crime. The community members, not the judge, then work out a legal agreement called the Repair from Harm Agreement. For example, the victim may ask the participant to paint over graffiti or volunteer at a neighborhood food drive or some such. The participant is connected with social service agencies to help them take GED classes or find a job and stay free from crime. The Repair of Harm Agreement usually takes 6 months to a year to complete, at which point the participants' charges are formally dropped with the potential to have their record expunged. The court works even if there isn't a victim. Drug cases have made up a majority of the 44 cases held at the community court up to the 2018 time when this was written. In 14 of those cases, there was no specific victim. Therefore, the court staff used volunteers as surrogate victims. And the surrogates are chosen from volunteers who may be former victims of crimes or people with criminal backgrounds who want to act as mentors. Ultimately, now, researchers at Adler University are leading an effort to measure the court's success over a 3-year period. Proposed metrics include a streamlined referral of cases and evidence that participants have both effectively resolved the case and solved some of the root causes behind the crimes. And there are links to Adler to find out more about that, but those links don't work. So I really wasn't able to find out anything about what has progressed through that data gathering process. Okay, with those definitions and examples as context, I think we can pretty quickly look at the questions, and I'll say what they are, and then whatever whatever conversation you want to have about it. 8A, question 8A, they really don't even give a question, but I think that the unasked question here is this: does the Illinois Constitution allow the use of a restorative justice process? The pro to this question is, while the term restorative justice is not used in the Illinois Constitution, the concept is found in Article 1, Section 11, which states, all penalties shall be determined both according to the seriousness of the offense and with the objective of restoring the offender to useful citizenship. Within this pro, there's a lot of information about that community court and definitions of restorative justice, the information really that we've just gone over. There's also a question about within the text, about the difference between restorative justice and our traditional legal system. And there's a chart that I found in one of the references that is a list of things that I thought I had in front of me. Oh, over here. That helps to really make it clear the difference between retributive versus restorative justice. And I can send that out so that you don't have to look for it. I don't think you can see it on there. So like as John has done and sent some articles, I could send that out. So the pro then is that restorative justice, the term isn't used in the Illinois Constitution, but the concept.
And why
the
do we
con-
care if it's in the Constitution or not, as opposed to just, is it a good thing or not?
I guess we care if it's in the Constitution, because if we're going to fund it, and if it's going to be, if restorative justice is going to be a part of the criminal justice process in the state of Illinois, apparently they feel it's necessary. That was not really explained either.
I mean,
Well,
that should be either it's in there or it isn't. It shouldn't be up to the league to have to, I mean, it's either there or not.
Well, then the con to that pro isn't clear to me either. And it says the criminal justice system exists for the victims of crime to receive restitution and retribution to punish the offenders. And I don't know where that comes in. I don't know where that statement, it's not cited, that statement is in the Constitution, or that,
No, that's just that somebody says.
yeah.
I wonder if what they really meant to ask is this kind of approach valid? Is it going to be okay and not run into legal problems? But
I'm
that's
sure
not for the league to.
because you wouldn't want some lawyer coming up and say, "Oh, that's unconstitutional."
Yeah,
We have
but-
to throw that out. I'm sure that's what they're after.
But one of the references is actually a prosecutorial diversion survey. And I think that's where I got the Madison County example. And it has a whole list of things that fall under the category of prosecutorial diversion, many of which seem to be maybe restorative justice light, not the full-blown community court example that we have from Cook County, but So I think they've proven that it's already a part of the criminal justice system in one way or another. So that's the first question.
I
Any-
guess their con is a lot of people are saying the reason that they want people to be punished.
Punished, yeah.
They
Right.
want people to be punished. And that's why you don't go, so the reason there's a fine and they have to pay restitution, it's not for their own transformation. It's because it's punishment,
Well, right, that's what it says. It says retribution, it says.
right? So
And
why?
yet,
Mhm.
and yet the Article 1, Section 11 of the Constitution says all penalties shall be determined both according to the seriousness of the offense and with the objective of restoring the offender to useful citizenship.
Right.
So it doesn't say that the primary purpose is punishment.
It doesn't. So I don't know where the con statement came from.
Mhm.
Because that's what people think. I mean,
Mhm.
right, they're right. They didn't cite it, right? But
Right. Right. Okay, well, shall I go on to the second question?
Yes.
To be successful, must restorative justice courts involve members of the community? And the pro is the example of the North Lawndale Restorative Justice Community Court. So the text, again, describes that court and its goals, and then it asks
yes,
a list of questions that it really doesn't necessarily answer. Well, like John was saying with his, the answers are yes, to be.
Yeah.
Why is there hope for better results using a restorative justice model? Well, the example of the community court is one. Should communities have a say in how residents are punished for crime? Doesn't really ever fully address that. Can restorative justice operate freely within the criminal justice system? I think the previous example of the prosecutorial diversion survey answers that question with a yes. Then the evaluation will include, and then it talks about the evaluation. Will defendants choose restorative justice to avoid incarceration? I didn't understand really what that question was getting at. Is that a plus or a minus? And then will they be truly committed to the process of repairing the harm? And the answers, I think, are yes, or participation of the community can address those challenges is another statement that was in there. So the con is it can be exhausting work to keep community members involved in restorative justice. In the adversarial system, members of the community do not need to be involved in the process. It is between the offender, the victim, and the court. Restorative justice courts should only focus on the victim being made whole subsequent to a crime.
Because we never want to help the perpetrator, right? Because we want to play whack-a-mole and just slap them over and over and over.
Yeah, right. So the question,
It's a little late by the time they've served their sentence to start working on restoration.
Yeah.
so the question is, must members of the community be involved in restorative justice? And the answer is certainly yes to that. And that's really the plus of it all, is that the community is involved and brings the resources of the community and the relationships of the community and all of that to it. So that was,
I have a question, or I was wondering when I read that. If communities being involved, does that mean you go to the whole community and say you vote on this? Or is it a matter of individuals sitting in these circles and knowing what the situation is, and then they have a role? That I see as a role. I don't see a community as a whole voting on something like this.
right. No, all the examples are groups of some kind, boards or groups that work with the offender.
Well, I could see where a community might want to, they're saying, should a community be able to say, yes, we want restorative justice, or we don't? They're really saying, should they be able to say, we don't want that? You know, so, and it might, depending on what part of the country you live in, it might be more saying, we don't want to bother with that. We don't want restorative justice. We want victims to get, you know, paid back, to have, they won't say revenge, you know, but we don't want that in our court system. We want law and order, victims, you know,
Well,
get.
that
So
is.
should a community have, so they're saying, should a community be able to decide that?
You know, they'd almost have to decide it, because if you want something like those circles to work, it's got to be community-based, and you have to build a community will to want to do that and see the results from it. And that kind of thing may depend on one or two communities doing it and showing data that says, yes, this person was reintegrated into the community, did not commit crime again. The whole community is better for it, as opposed to just, you know, whack a fine on someone and then they go out and do the same thing again and we're nowhere. But I think that an individual community is going to have to be able to determine if that is appropriate for them or not. Because this is the sort of thing, if you enforce it on everybody, you're going to have pushback and people are going to say, no, I don't want to do it, and it won't work. It's only going to work if the community is willing to take that step, I think.
Wouldn't the court system in each county have to decide that they would want to do that or not? I would think it would have to emanate from the court system.
Yeah, the county.
And ultimately, you have the vote to throw out the judges.
It's
Well,
the state's attorney in the county, I think, that would
In the court, yes,
lead and
you're right.
you know, and another good example, she gave some very good examples of how social justice really work. And is that they use it in some school systems, but it's usually in the smaller school districts, maybe at one school, and everybody agrees to it, all the teachers, administrators, social workers, psychologists are all involved. And so they've been able to get good results using that system within the school, at certain schools. And I can see how it could work very easily because everybody is involved, the teachers, the parents, you know, even the cooks and the janitors, everybody is. And they're able to bring about positive results, you know, with students that are what they consider at risk.
I was telling my daughter about the reading I was doing, and she said, oh, her friend Megan at Collinsville Middle School, the social worker, Yvonne, she said, Megan is an expert on restorative justice.
Yes, because they probably used it in their system and it's working for them.
I think one concept about restorative justice goes to what John was talking to, is if as a community, we are not investing in the development of our children or in the things that it takes to keep people out of the system, then we're responsible in a way for the people that get there, you know, because we haven't developed the kind of community where everybody can develop like they should. And so then, you know, whereas some people might say, well, you know, they just got into the system and they made bad choices, you know, and put it all on the person. But really, as people, you know, we should all be responsible for how our community, you know, lets people develop. So therefore, to me, the corollary to that would be restorative justice that helps get people, then we're responsible for helping get people out of that behavior.
Exactly.
I I was reminded of John's talk to his point about adults, a child having 2 or 3 adults in his life. And in your story about the young man, some of the adults in that circle, one of them offered him a job, and there were other things. And so I don't know how long a period of time this extended over, but they developed relationships with this child, adults,
It was,
and it provided something that maybe this child had missed.
in the example, it was a year, and the community court said that the things that they did to provide restitution lasted 6 months to a year. And that it seems reasonable to me that that process needs to take that length of time to accomplish its goals.
Mhm. Did what you read a lot talk about how it was healing for the victims? Did you see examples, to where sometimes, victims, you just want to know why somebody would do this, and to you, and then, but it helps them heal sometimes too. Whereas I think a lot of times they think if I can, the person just gets put in jail, or especially if it's like something really bad, like violence committed against them. I'm not sure that, what did they didn't use the word revenge, retribution. I'm not sure that that's always healing,
Yeah.
for a victim.
I did some reading about this subject a while back, and not every crime is suitable. Like, for instance, they talked about rape. Well, that's not gonna be a suitable
Yeah.
crime for this kind of process. It would be traumatic for the victim to,
They had to be nonviolent crimes.
right, nonviolent.
In some articles that Carol sent me, in the Bay Area and in New York City, where some form of it is being used to address violent crimes, but it didn't give a lot of details about that, and I don't know how they work, but apparently it is being tried in some situations like that. It is hard to imagine facing.
Well, I think it would be very helpful because of it gives the person who committed the crime some dignity, and his word has some value. I mean, he has to admit that he committed the crime, but still he's treated like a real human being, an adult, and not dehumanized the way most of the system treats people. So I think it would be good in that respect. I was thinking of a story that happened during the flood of 1993, when they were working on the levees and fighting the river for months on end here along the Mississippi River. It went on for months, and they brought prisoners in, and some of those to help. And some of those prisoners really had never been outside the city of Chicago, let alone in rural America, rural Illinois. And they were helping work, and it just was they seemed to enjoy that sense of camaraderie, the sense that they were doing something important, not just being outside, but they were doing something important. And then one day, I don't know, it was my brother-in-law or somebody else asked someone if he could ask one of the men if he could drive. And he said, yes. And he said, well, here, take these keys and go and send him on an errand. And the guy looked at him like, you mean you're handing me the keys to your car and telling me to drive somewhere and go to this other town and get something? It's like, it was the first time in his life anybody had ever trusted him to do anything. And I think it didn't get him out of jail or anything like that, but I think it must have done really something for him as a person.
Well, we talked about it, 8A and 8B, and 8C is another aha question. Must restorative justice courts be adequately funded? And the pro says, as noted above, funding can be a challenge, but this model has such promise of actually restoring young people to their communities and at the same time addressing the needs and concerns of victims in a manner far superior to our traditional system. So how do you measure cost when results can be so promising? And then the con is, it seems unlikely that the two systems can be adequately funded. This is a new experiment in Illinois. It is too early to see whether the outcomes measure up to the hopes for restorative justice. Restorative justice courts should only focus on the victim being made whole subsequent to a crime. You know, they've talked in a couple of these examples as if the current system makes the victim whole. And when does it ever make the victim whole? Never.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to me that that's in the con of these questions. But so the question there, must they be adequately funded?
I think you had said when you began about how unsatisfactory the current system is for victims. You know,
Right.
I mean, we've been talking about that since then, but I do think that it's not satisfactory at all for victims.
Right.
I think the victims are going to benefit as much from this as perpetrators of crime, really, as far as their harms being heard in a group of people, and you know, people listening to the harms they suffered. You know, it gives them a chance to work through the experience for themselves.
So that covers that question. I wanted to just mention that Carol had sent 2 articles that I wrote up a little summary, and I'll send the summary, and then if you're interested, you can, Becky posting those to, or will post or has posted the links to those articles somewhere. But I think there's some information in these articles that takes the topic of restorative justice and expands upon it further than the information that's provided in our study question, takes it further than that.
Do you have the titles of those articles?
Yes, the first one is called Where Incarceration Isn't the Answer. And it has a lot of information about prison populations and the Scandinavian systems of prisons. But the part that it leads to that I think has a place in the conversation that we've been having is that the racial bias in this country and the makeup of the prison population in this country is so different than the situation in the Scandinavian countries that it really brings us to a point of recognition that if we want to change the criminal justice system, we have to change that racial bias in this country, and we have to address that head on in the ways that we modify or bring change to our criminal justice system. That's such a huge part of the problem that is our criminal justice system, that question has to be acknowledged, that challenge has to be acknowledged. But it's a long article, but really an interesting one. And then the other article is called Making Space for Restorative Justice. And both of these articles have statistics that are really startling. That this one says that the rate of the U.S. has the highest rate of incarceration in the world, a rate that has increased 500% in the past 5 decades. And it says, so we know that we have over 2 million people, something like 2.12, in the prison system and jails and prisons altogether. Possibly as many as 482,000 people currently held in local jails are there simply because they're too poor to pay the bail. So they haven't even been convicted of anything. So 20% of our prison population is being held there. They haven't even been convicted of anything, and they're there indefinitely. I guess that's what they used to call debtor's prison, isn't it?
Right.
That's what
And
Susan, right.
The workhouse in St. Louis.
They can't
Right.
pay to get out
And
because
people with mental illness are more likely to end up in prison for a lesser offense or in jail, stay longer, and be worse when they get out.
yeah.
Can I just real quick, this conversation really interesting, and it reminded me of something I studied or read about or something a long time ago. It was about primitive societies where if somebody does something against the norms, instead of punishing them, they put them in a position of responsibility. And maybe we can learn something from that sort of thing.
Give them the keys to the car.
I think in Africa now too, and I read it recently, but I also had our pastor tell me this. He saw this when he went there one time, is when, they're very community minded, and that's the whole focus of their society. I don't know, a certain area, but when someone did something wrong, they would have for, I don't know, it might even be 2 or 3 days, they would have everybody in the village would come together, make a circle or whatever. And the person who did the crime would come into the middle of it. And then they would spend hours or days telling all the good things about him, about the person, and all the good things that they had done to help them remind themselves of who they are, of where they've come from. And then the end result is, that they are welcomed back into the community. That's Ubuntu. What do they call that? Have you ever heard that word? UBUNT?
Ubuntu.
Or something.
You are who I am. I don't know what it means exactly, but it's just taking community responsibility too.
But that makes so much sense because all of us will rise or fall to the expectations people have of us.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody tells you you're bad, you're going to end up being bad. If somebody tells you you're wonderful, you're going to think you can be wonderful. So yeah, it's community involvement means a whole lot, I think. And in a way, going through these questions, they are kind of like duh questions, but they're also, I think, getting us to really think more holistically about these questions. And we've talked about maybe doing something like community justice as a topic for local, some local work. And we do have some examples in our courts of things kind of along those lines. So I could see this turning into something that we do want to spend some time and effort on.
There are the names of some of the people that are on that board right here in Madison County. And it would be interesting to
talk to one of them.
I think it'd be a great program this winter.
Right.
Mhm.
Does anybody have any more questions for Ann?
I'll just say one more thing, because this picks up on something that someone else said earlier. One of the things in one of these articles from Yes Magazine, in addition to the difference in the populations, the prison populations, the reason the Scandinavian countries have been able to make the changes they've made is because it really doesn't go to the public to say, I like that or I don't like that. The decisions are made by the professionals in the field. And you can imagine, and they were saying that in that case, they're able to fund things in a way, humane things in their prison system that if that might never be possible in this country because of that feeling of wanting retribution.
And that we don't trust professionals. In this
Yes,
country.
we don't trust the profession.
Yeah, I was wondering in your reading, did you come across, are there any places where there's a program that's robust enough to have data, you know, to evaluate the outcomes?
I didn't find that, but I have there was some reference to programs in other parts of the country. I'll go back and look again and see if I missed something, but they just focused all of their hope, I guess, on this restorative justice court, community court in Cook County. And by now there may be some information about that, but I was a little worried when I went to the Adler University link and it wasn't there anymore. So I hope that's still ongoing. But it's like 2 years now since that last article that was a part of this, the information that was available.
I think Oakland, look up what they're doing in Oakland. I think it might have,
I think that was mentioned. It was in a different way, but I'll have to look.
I want to put in a quick plug for this magazine. I want to see this. Yes, Yes is the name of it. You can get it, the subscription now for like $15. And it's all about positive, it's a vision for how we can go forward. It's all about positive things that are happening all over our country. Things that you might not hear about that people are doing, like urban farm, things. Now we're hearing more about urban farming and food forests and things. But and the issue before this was all written by Black authors about, different issues. But it's really gives you a idea of things. It really is good because you hear things that are going on that are successful that we don't hear otherwise. But so we have 15. Pardon, Becky? Yes magazine. It's called Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Becky, how do we get so on the Google Drive? Can you explain how they can find the links to those, any articles that John puts on there, any that all the speakers will put on there?
The invite had a link to that folder. So there's a folder set up under committees. There's a folder for committees, and then under that I've made one for criminal justice study 2020 to 2021. And all the documents so far are stored in that. So there's a link in the email invite you got to that folder. You can go to that link and you should be able to see all the documents in that folder. You can print them, download them, edit them, do whatever you want with them. And if you want to add something to that folder and it's on your own computer, you should be able to just go to that folder, add it, say add a document, and upload it into that folder. If you can't do that, send me a copy of it and I'll do it for you.
On Google Drive.
So take a look at the invite you got for this meeting or the follow-up one, because I'll send one out, send the same thing out with the recording once that's ready, and it should have a link to that folder.
There are lots of references here in the league document too.
Hey, Becky, when you say there's a link, are you talking about to the document? There's a Google Doc referenced in that email. Is that what you're talking about?
That should be a link to the Google folder where all this stuff is stored.
I don't see it in the email, but maybe I'm missing something.
Well, let me go look.
Yeah,
It was in one of them because I used it, tried to.
okay. Maybe it was in the one before this.
No, it should have been in this one too. Hold
It
on.
says criminal justice position overview for discussion is what I see.
Anybody that has an article that you read that really speaks to you can put it on there. It doesn't have to be one of the people on the committee that's presenting the issue. You know, if you say, wow, this really is a great example, then put it on there. Please.
Oh, you know what? I put the link to it in that document itself.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, got it.
Carol did this wonderful overview document. That's what that
Yes.
is
Good.
in that document.
I got it. Okay, I can find it. Thank you.
Okay, then I guess Susan didn't get on, so then I guess that puts policing next, which is me.
I don't think we have time to start policing.
We don't have time. You know,
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that because I will improve my screen sharing like John did better. It's kind of hard if you don't have the questions in front of you, you know, to kind of see what they're talking about.
Right.
I did wonder about that number 4 question. You said we'd leave it till sometime later, see if we had
Yeah.
time for it.
Yeah, we could look at that. I don't have the wording here. Do you have that wording in front of you?
It's on data collection and transparency. The question is, are efficient data collection, data sharing, and transparency critical in an impartial and unbiased criminal justice system? That maybe I can.
Well, I think, so they're saying data collection stuff. So when Becky says like, you know, that she thinks we should have, the league should be, I don't know if that was Becky or maybe it was Jane that said the league should be looking at things that research has proven this works, you know. That's where the data collection, you know, is so important. And like one thing, like in policing, they'll say like every time police, like they do a stop and frisk, you know, or some kind of stop like that, they should have to document that. And the people will, people in support of that will say, and they should say, you know, what was the race of the person? You know, it's going to take a lot of time to do that. But if you know the race of the people that are stopped, you know, and then that helps you understand if there's racial profiling going on, you know, was there a gun found or was there, you know, what was involved? Because if you don't have that data collected, then there's no way to say, yes, this percent, you know, that we're really unbalanced in our, you know, who gets stopped and who doesn't or stopped. And
Well,
also,
the pro here says measurement is essential in order to know whether desired results are achieved and help identify and share best practices.
and if you want accountability and transparency, then you have to emphasize that, even though it takes time, because I don't know what the cons are, but I'm sure they're going to say it takes time to do that and money. But
my question is what the money part might be balanced, the extra money that it costs might be balanced out by the cost. You would eliminate some duplication of efforts if the different bodies shared information. But my question is about privacy. Is this a real concern? Are we pigeonholing people or stigmatizing them or stereotyping them or anything like that? I don't know. That was my question when I read this. how privacy fits into this.
It's a valid question. I guess
I think there's a lot of data collection already going on. I mean, if you read books like The New Jim Crow, they will have all kinds of statistics that say, you know, Black people are stopped this percentage of time more than whites, and they're searched this percentage of time, and drugs are found this percentage. I mean, there's a lot of this already going on, and I think it's a no-brainer that we have to have that kind of. And if it's just aggregate, you know, numbers, I don't think it's a privacy issue.
Yeah.
I remember when my daughter, oh, go ahead, Rachel.
I'm just saying, if we're gonna take steps anywhere in the system to try to diminish that through some sort of training of officers or some sort of incentive program, you have to know, did it work? You know, you have to know, are the numbers more equivalent to the population?
I think there will also, it's sometimes be questions about the trustworthiness of the data you're getting.
Yeah, a lot of it also depends on what question you ask and how you ask it.
And how police officers or whatever are reporting.
Yeah.
I remember when my daughter was in school in West Virginia, and the coal mining, it's only in recent years that there's been data collection about pollution and things in the rivers. And anytime they brought legislation up against the coal companies for polluting the rivers, they would say, well, you can't, how do we know that those fish died because of our pollution? You know, how do we know, you know, that we're the cause of this? There's no evidence, you know, there's no data that shows that. So then, you know, they started training citizens how to do, you know, testing the waters and things like that. But I think it could be the same thing maybe in this situation if you don't have that. But so we might have to say, what is the oversight of that? You know, yeah, you know, who writes the questions right? But how do you provide oversight over making sure that the data is whatever Brent was saying, you know, that it's not false.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Are you finding this helpful? I think that that consensus meeting would be a pretty long meeting if we weren't doing these now, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you could do it, but
We could just go, yeah, duh.
we say that, but a lot of people might not think the duh, you know, I mean. So I have to get with people on the committee and see who wants to cover the other issues. If you have something that you're interested in, Jane is going to do a little bit on she's going to do the prison to school pipeline and explain that a little bit more, because that's a term we hear a lot now. I don't think people know what that means. That'll be included in policing probably.
Carol,
I'm not going to assign questions, so you'll have to pick them.
if I can make a suggestion, just
Yes,
from,
please.
when we have like a board meeting, I'll record it and then listen to it and do the minutes from the recording. And sometimes if the meeting's been like an hour and a half, then it's another hour and a half or 2 hours to do that and digest the meeting and get the minutes down. You're going to go through that same issue when you listen to these recordings, because they've been like, what, 2 hours a piece?
So I'll start right away.
We'll start right away, but maybe share it. Maybe each person from the committee can take one of them or half of them.
Oh, yeah.
You know, spread it around a little bit, because you'll fry your brain.
So I said at the beginning a little bit, at the end, so there's a consensus after the consensus meeting, we have a form to fill out, and I looked at it, and it really just asks yes or no. Did you get a consensus or not? You know,
Yeah,
and then it says comments, you know, so
that's,
I think we'll have to go, yes, here's our comments on each question, you know, these were our reservations. It doesn't really ask, it says comments, but
but where we can make suggestions, like
yes,
data
Right, right.
such as, you know, that kind of thing.
right. And to make sure, I think it's really important when you make points about making sure that how it applies to us down here in our communities and also in the rural areas down here, not just to Chicago.
And I think where we can point out, you know, if our court system is already doing something along the lines of restitution, point that out.
Right.
Yes, justice.
Right, because I think our court systems, you know, on our speakers before, you know, that we're leading models in that with our court
Yeah.
systems.
Yes.
Because we
And
have
in
a
the,
special-
and in the bail, you know, like no bail, cash bail. Susan will talk about that when she does hers, but we're leaders in that. Rachel,
Programs, lots of them,
what?
lots of diversion programs in our court system. We're very progressive that way.
And do you think we have data on that, of the successes? I'm sure we do. Well, I'd like to say we do.
Or even just to provide, if we've got a list of what are the diversion programs that we have here that are active and, you know, in work, that would be helpful to show what's going on.
I was pretty excited when I was reading through all that stuff and came to I went Madison County, that's us.
Very progressive. Yeah, no, there's many diversion. There's veterans court, and there's drug court, there's
Mental health.
mental health. Yeah, there's a
Veteran
lot.
court stuff, right.
Wait,
Yeah, the issue with data is that, you know, you've got apples and oranges, and how do you, I mean, you're not gonna, you know, give the service to somebody who wasn't in the criminal justice. There's no way to really compare populations. So what you could look at is the percentage of people who completed this program, how long they went, you know, without reoffending. There's that kind of data exists
I'm
for
sure.
like drug courts and those sorts of things. So yeah, there's data that shows that, and there's data on juvenile diversion, I think that, but it's, you know, it's really within each program, you can't kind of compare them because, you know, we're human beings, I guess. We're not experiments.
There was data even and we got like 1 minute left. Even in the policing thing, it was saying like, you have to prove that the money that was taken, like when you arrest somebody for drug offense, you know, and you take their money, and I guess, I don't know if the police, I have to look at that, have to give it back or not, but they have to prove that it really was used in the crime. I mean, there's, you know, like other, I guess that's
Right.
statistics maybe, but. Oh, let's keep to the 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's a long Zoom, huh? So we'll
Right.
see you the next time. So we have scheduled January 7th and 14th. I think that's correct, at 7.
That's correct.
And then 18th will be the consensus meeting. We need to encourage other league members, even if they haven't been on these, to get in the consensus meeting if they can, because the more members we have, the more, you know, it's better. Because we'll have to say, I guess, what percentage of our league was at the meeting, maybe.
Well, or if they watch the recordings, that will come.
Or if they watch recordings, right? Okay, we'll see everybody Thursday, huh? With your jingle bell hats on
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
or whatever. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
That was
Bye-bye.
fun. We had our party here.